Hi, this is Bill Muckler, and this is the American Vision on the TLBTV network, brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Project. Today we're going to talk about vision, my vision, and hopefully what you will develop as your vision. Who am I? Well, I guess I could start off by saying I'm a great-grandfather, I'm a Christian, I'm a Mizzou alum, a Marine captain, an entrepreneur, work process management consultant, and now I'm supposed to be an author, although I think of myself more as being a problem solver and a futurist. Being an author, I've written several books. The one book I want to talk about today is 2020, A Clear Vision for Our Future. That's my new book and still to be published. And then the book that is already published, 2020, A Clear Vision for America. And that's a book I showed you on the last show that I had. So we'll do a little commercial right now, 2020, A Clear Vision for America. And remember I said this book even has a spine in it. And that's a lot more than what the publishing companies have. And it's an awful lot more than what our politicians have. And certainly something that our shady stream media is definitely lacking in. Spine. They have none. And so if you want a spine, you can get this book. Hey, 2020, A Clear Vision for America. Buy this book, read the book. It's got all the solutions in there that help you with what you need to know about how America needs to be put back on the right track so America can see straight again. Because this is my optimistic blueprint to restore American exceptionalism. Let's start out by asking you. I asked this question on my last show. Do you have a vision? Do you have a vision for America? Do you have a vision for your future? Do you have a vision for your family and your kids and grandkids? What is your vision? People talk about, well, you have to have a dream. Well, a dream is a good thing to have, but you also have to have a vision for what you think America should be like and what you would think, how you would fit in the American vision. So I want you to think about that. So let's start talking about me and how I developed my vision. And I've been blessed with a very good memory, a good long-term memory, especially. I can remember things that happened when I was 2 years old and 3 years old. I can remember when I was 5 years old, reading the paper and reading and being interested in who is going to be our next president. And it was FDR running against Wendell Willkie. You probably never heard of him before. You don't know anything about that. And I remember that. It was a very contentious election. And the thing about it was Roosevelt was running for a third term. And some people thought that was unconstitutional. Certainly they thought it was not appropriate for someone to usurp that kind of power. And what we've been seeing in this country since about 1913, and some people want to go back all the way back to 1871, 72, when we, in a sense, turned the country over to the United States of America Corporation. And we have that in our history, but in 1913, we certainly started down the wrong path. And 1935, the year that I was born, well, guess what? That was the year of Social Security. That really put us on the wrong downward spiral. Just think of everything that's happened to us since we've been trying to give everything to everybody. That's what America's not what America's about. America is about the American spirit. And the American spirit was founded in the 1770s, 1776, if you want to talk about the Declaration of Independence. But as I've written in my articles, the founding fathers declared more than independence. They declared the American spirit. And by that, I mean they took responsibility to make those 13 colonies a country, a republic. And they were resilient, they were self-sufficient, and they were willing to give up everything, including their lives, just to declare the American spirit. And the American spirit is to be independent. Unfortunately, now we are becoming more and more dependent. And that's what I was seeing back in 1940 when I was 5 years old. I could see that. I could see my father working many long hours and paying taxes and not having any say in what was happening in America. Then in 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. In the meantime, Germany was advancing all throughout Europe and declaring war on just about every country there. Russia, Poland, France, England had taken over just about everything. And the Axis powers were, in a sense, ready to rule this, this whole planet. And that was Germany, Italy, and Japan. Fortunately, the United States, with the American spirit, was able to overcome that. But anyway, I remember being able to read in 1940, and I used to help my father. He was a typesetter. He had a typography company. And one of his clients was the St. Louis American newspaper. You say, well, what does that mean? You know, who cares? Well, at that time, St. Louis had a lot of newspapers. They had the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the St. Louis Star-Times, the St. Louis Globe-Democrat, and on and on. And all these newspapers were printing daily. The St. Louis American was a weekly newspaper. And it was produced by and edited by and owned by, I guess, a man by the name of Mr. Nathaniel Sweets, a black man. And this was a black newspaper. And so I was reading this. I was a copy boy holding copy while my dad brought this work home. We sat at the dining room table and we read the newspaper. We proofread the newspaper. So I knew every intimate thing about that newspaper. When it got to be about 1941, 42, I was doing a lot of the proofreading on my own because my dad at that time was working 60, 80 more hours per week. And what was he doing? He was in World War I, and now America was in World War II. So he was working for the war effort by doing the typesetting for a lot of training manuals for the United States Army. I got to read some of that stuff. It was pretty technical for a young boy like myself. So I helped out with some of the things that were less technical, like reading the newspaper. That was something I could do. So what happened then was we saw a lot of changes in America, and we see changes in America every day, but that doesn't mean the American spirit has changed. The American spirit is still with us. And that doesn't mean that we're different people. No, we're not. We're the same people. What's changed is technology. The automobiles are newer and shinier. The telephone system is a lot different than it was back in 1940 when we had a party line and two families shared the same telephone. In fact, I think at first there, our telephone number was Hudson 6036, and it was 4 parties. That was during the war. And then we got to a 2-party system where, you know, if you picked up the phone and the other neighbor was on there, you had to wait until they got off before you can make your phone call. Just think of how different it is today. But are people different? No. We still eat food, drink water. We still do everything. We breathe air. We still do everything the same. We're the same people. We have the same bodies, the same souls. But what we have today is a much higher standard of living, and we have much better technology. Things are certainly much better. In the 1940s, during World War II, gasoline was rationed. That meant you could only buy so many gallons of gas per month. And you had a sticker that you had to put on your windshield to show you're gas rationing. And my father, fortunately, got a higher level of rationing because he was involved in the war effort. So we got more gas, but then he needed gas because he had errands he had to run and people he had to see to conduct the business with the government in St. Louis at that time. So what else was happening at that time? Well, we're a Catholic family, and so we didn't eat meat on Friday because according to Catholic Church at that time, you didn't eat meat on Friday. They relaxed that rule with the Vatican II to where you can eat meat on every day of the week, every week of the year, except for Good Friday and Ash Wednesday. So what did they do? Well, Roosevelt was a very authoritarian type of president, and he ruled like a king. He was an overlord. People don't know that, but that's what he was. And people, think, oh, what a great man he was. Well, I'm not so sure about that, but then we'll leave that to the historians. Let's put it this way. He said, well, we're going to have meatless Tuesdays because he knew there was a large population in the United States that was Catholic that weren't going to eat meat on Friday. So now we weren't going to eat meat on Tuesdays either. And the reason for that was we needed to have meat to put in C rations and feed our armed forces personnel. So everyone was on board with that. We cared about the country. We cared about our servicemen. We did everything we could for them. We sacrificed for them. Does anybody sacrifice anything today? I don't think so. 1.5% of the people in the United States are in the military service right now. 1.5%. And the other 98.5%, some of them care and some of them could care less, and some of them even hate the military. Why? Because they gave them the rights they have today, they gave them the entitlements they have today, and that's just not good enough. It's something called being grateful. That is what's changed in America. We don't have that anymore. So what happened during World War II? I became an entrepreneur, and some of it was not by choice, but it was by need. For example, what we were instructed to do was everybody in your backyard, you grew a victory garden. Does anybody do that today to help our armed forces personnel? No, we grew a victory garden, and I was the head farmer. I was the chief farmer because my dad was working all the time. My mother had duties in the house, so I was the farmer, and I had a victory garden. I planted rows and rows and rows of stuff out in the backyard, and I did pretty much all of it by myself. Got a little guidance and instruction from my mom and dad, but it was my job. I took that job on. I was responsible for it. I had the American spirit. I wanted us to win the war, and we won the war by being able to produce a lot of our own consumables. So many of the things that we needed to support our troops, they were available for them, and we weren't consuming everything. Today, we consume everything. We don't care what it is. It's ours, me, myself, and I, and I'll take whatever I want, and I'll waste whatever I want, and I'll do whatever I want. So anyway, that's what I did during in the war effort. In the meantime, I was still going to school, and I was doing some proofreading at night, and because a lot of the men were in the service, because we were building up a large military service, there weren't men around to do a lot of jobs that need to be done around the neighborhood. So being an entrepreneur, I used to mow lawns, and I mowed lawns with a push mower. It's called a reel mower, a push mower. No electric, no gas, no pushers except Bill. I was the pusher. And I would get a quarter for mowing someone's lawn. And in our neighborhood, everybody had a front yard and a backyard. So I mowed the front yard and the backyard and swept everything up and trimmed and did everything like that. And it usually took me a couple of hours or more. And I got a quarter. And I thought I was rich. I thought I was doing great. And you know what I did with my money? I opened up an account with what was known then as savings and loan associations. We don't have them anymore. The politicians got rid of them. They didn't like them because the big bankers don't like them. And what do we do in America today? We worship the big bankers. Yeah, oh my, wonderful. And the Federal Reserve, oh my, isn't that great? We got all those wonderful people that we just worship and idolize, and we do whatever they say, and we're programmed to do whatever they want us to do. But anyway, I put my money in the Savings and Loan Association. And then in the wintertime, it seemed like we always had a lot of snow in the wintertime. I shoveled snow for all the neighbors, and I'd get 25 cents for shoveling the snow. And a lot of times in the summertime, I would help people clean out their garages and do stuff like that. You always got a quarter. Well, that was good. And then as I got a little bit older, I got to a point where I could, one of the ladies in our neighborhood, her husband belonged to the Sunset Hills Country Club in South County, St. Louis. So she used to give me a ride out to the golf course one morning a week. And guess why? Because there weren't enough guys around the caddy, so I was a caddy. And the women's bags weren't that heavy, and there weren't enough caddies around, so I could always carry 2 bags. And I kind of struggled with it at first, but I could carry 2 bags. And I got $1 a piece for that. That was $2 for 4 hours worth of work. Man, I had money. And then I would hang around in the afternoon, and if there were guys that came into play, I could caddy for them because they didn't have carts then. There were no golf carts like you see running around every golf course right now. They just weren't there. They didn't have them. And if they could have had them, they wouldn't have had them because all the everything that was built for our country, in our country, was built for the war effort. Everybody sacrificed. So I would carry a bag and I'd get I could make another $1. And sometimes guys are pretty nice. They might give you $1.50, an extra quarter, half a dollar. Sometimes they can give you $2. Boy, that was great. And you know what I did then? It was time to go home. I hitchhiked home. I hitchhiked. I was just a little kid. I was like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old at this time. And that's how I got around. America was a different place. And I didn't need a safe space either. I didn't have a safe space. I didn't have a safe space in my victory garden or when I was cutting the grass or shoveling the snow or caddying or cleaning out dirty, dusty garages. Nothing like that. And I took that money and I saved it. Now, kids not only don't save their money, they run up big credit card debts because they all got credit cards. Who would have thought? We didn't have credit cards back then. It just was not anything that was even thought of in the United States of America. So my vision of America was, hey, get out and work, sacrifice, do something for your country, and be a good citizen, and save some money, and be able to look ahead into the future and say, hey, if I save some money, I can go to college. If I save some money, I can get a new car. If I save some money, I can buy a house. Wouldn't that be great? So is that what's happening today? Do our young kids know that today? No, they don't know that today because that's not the way they're brought up. They're brought up not to have faith. They're not brought up to have anything to do with anything other than playing video games and texting on their telephones and living a life that is protected and safe and give me whatever I want or I'll throw a temper tantrum attitude. That is America today. So my vision of America is a little bit different than most of your visions because I'm just a lot older than you, and I started out very early with this thing because I saw that early in my life. I saw that being responsible and being self-reliant and sacrificing myself and doing things for people. And a lot of times I did jobs for the neighbors I didn't get paid for. Like if a neighbor needed somebody to go to the grocery store, we didn't have big Walmarts and big Publixes and all these Krogers and all these big grocery stores at the time. The closest grocery store was just a small mom and pop store about 3 blocks away. And I would take some money and their list, and I'd go to the store and get their stuff and bring it back for them as a courtesy. Sometimes they'd give me a cookie, you know. It was great. You know, it was wonderful. And what happened when we weren't in school and we didn't have jobs, we had a park about a block away from our house, small city park. We used to go up there and we played ball. If it was in summertime, we played baseball. If it was the wintertime, we played football. And we had an alley behind our house, and a few of the houses and garages in the back had basketball courts or basketball nets, backboards. So we would shoot baskets. And then when the lakes froze over, we went ice skating. We played ice hockey, and we didn't have anybody organizing this stuff for us. No one knew what we were really doing. We just went out and we played. We enjoyed ourselves. We were free. And our safe space is what we made for ourselves. Contrast that with what we have today. Does anybody have a vision of anything more than what am I going to buy today, and you know, even tomorrow? What am I going to do tomorrow? What are you going to do tomorrow? What are you going to do next week? Well, you may dream that you'd like to have a bigger house, or you may have the dreams of saying, well, if I can cut down the credit card debt a little bit, maybe we can go on a vacation on credit. Oh, yeah. Is that what our vision is? Is that our vision for America? I don't think so. So anyway, as I grew up, I was doing things I didn't really understand what I was doing. I didn't know I was doing jobs that Americans wouldn't do. And I was doing all those jobs Americans won't do. And I was doing them for, you know, a quarter, an hour, or something like that. And who knew? I didn't know. I should have held out and said, hey, wait a minute. I want $15 an hour. We had people that were lucky to make $15 a day, that were working hard, 8, 10-hour days in factories and in stores and doing service work. And now somebody wants $15 an hour just to show up when you have absolutely no skills. But what skills did I have? Well, I had skills to learn how to just do stuff on my own and learn how to be creative and be self-sufficient. And if there was a problem, I figured it out on my own. I was a problem solver. I troubleshot, and that's what I did. So as I got a little bit older, war was over. I was still proofreading the St. Louis American newspaper and some other stuff that my dad would bring home, because he didn't have a whole lot of employees, and so somebody needed to proofread the work so they could have the typesetting jobs ready to be delivered the next day. So I would help with the proofreading. So I had a lot of experience in knowing that, and I knew how to do stuff. I knew that, you know, life wasn't always going to be just me laying around, floating around, looking for a safe space. I was actually going to do stuff, and I really wanted to do stuff. I wanted to help my dad. I wanted to help my parents. That was, you know, I guess I didn't know it, but I was willing to sacrifice my time and toil and talent for a greater cause. Does anybody think of a vision with a greater cause today? I don't think so. It's just not anything that's happening today. So let's look at it from another point of view then. My father worked very hard, a lot of long hours, saved money. When he had a house built for us, he paid cash for it. He didn't get a mortgage, he paid cash. And then what he did is they decided, mom and dad, that they wanted to have some place where they could go on weekends and, you know, like a little resort thing. And they found this little community about 30 miles south of St. Louis in Hillsboro, Missouri, and it was a an artificial lake that was built, and it was called Lake Wawanoka. And at Lake Wawanoka, it was about 1.5 miles long and maybe half a mile wide, and it had some coves and everything, and it had lots all the way around the lake. And so my dad bought a couple of lots because he had saved money to do that. He didn't buy it on credit. He bought them out of money he saved. In the meantime, I'd been working and saving money too, but what I had wasn't enough to do anything like that. But you could afford something like that at that time because it didn't cost the amount of money it costs today. And why didn't it cost the amount of money it costs today? Because the Federal Reserve hadn't created that much money yet to inflate the dollar that much. So then he decided he wanted to build a house. So my dad and his brother Charlie and Charlie's 2 sons, Charles and Robert, and a few of their friends and neighbors and other relatives, they went out every weekend and they built this house. They actually built a house on this lake, and it turned out to be a pretty darn nice house too. I mean, it was very nice. And in fact, we always used to get compliments about, oh, this is one of the nicest houses on the whole lake property, or it's the nicest house, or we like it, it's one of the top 3 type of thing. So we did that, when I got to be about 14 years old, they were looking for someone to work out there, help maintain the grounds and the whole lake corporation property. So I guess I was 13 going on 14 that summer. I went to work and I was actually getting a paycheck. And I was having taxes and Social Security and all that stuff taken out of my paycheck. And I thought, this is crazy. I'm doing all this work and they're taking my money away from me. I'm just a kid and they're still taking my money. And what's this Social Security all about? I remember reading all about it. I kind of knew about it. And I thought, hey, they said this was only going to be like 1%, 1.5%. Now it's gone up and taxes have gone up. Why have taxes gone up? But anyway, I used to work. And sometimes at that time, the minimum wage had gone up to 65 cents an hour. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be one of the richest people in the world. I'm going to be making 65 cents an hour. And what do I have to do for that? All I have to do is do what the superintendent of the lake property wanted, Howard. Howard was a Marine Master Sergeant, World War II. He was one of the guys that was left out on the reefs by the Navy on Tarawa. He went through a lot of battles. I mean, this was a battle-scarred combat veteran Marine. Boy, he knew his stuff, though. He knew how to do everything. And so here's what my work week was all about. Talking about jobs Americans won't do. And I challenge anybody to match me with jobs Americans won't do, because I don't think there's one person in this country that has done all the different types of jobs that Americans won't do that I did. Monday morning, we had to go around and pick up the trash from the weekend because a lot of people are out there, and some people had houses and some people didn't have houses. In fact, most of the lots, people just maybe had a tent or a picnic table, it was while they were trying to get ready to build a house, and they had an outhouse. But you couldn't, I guess they had some rules that said you can't dig, an outhouse, so you had to use a chemical bucket in there. So what did Bill do? Bill went around with the lead man, Clifford, who was from Iron City, Missouri. He was a high school graduate. He was 18 years old, and Clifford was kind of like the lead guy. And he drove the tractor with the big flatbed trailer behind it, and Bill went along and went to every lot. If they had trash, and they were usually in 55-gallon drums or big containers, I had to empty the trash, and then I had to go down and check every outhouse. And if there was a honey bucket in the outhouse, I brought the honey bucket up and I dumped that into the appropriate 55-gallon drum that held the honey bucket contents on the flatbed trailer. How many American kids would do something like that? Now, I'm not one to say we need to have child labor or slave labor in America, but is any kids today, other than maybe some farm kids who know what I'm talking about, can any of them say, hey, I went out and did jobs like that? And so that was pretty much Monday, going around this entire lake. I mean, it was like I said, it was about 1.5 miles long and about 1/2 mile wide, a lot of coves. So by the time you wound your way around both sides of the lake, and then got out to where we dumped this stuff, man, that was a tough day, and it wasn't a very pleasant day either. But I did it, and I thought, I'm in heaven. I'm making 65 cents an hour. And then usually Tuesdays, we would do work around the lake. Sometimes there's little projects that need to be done, patching the road, all types of things that needed to be done to upkeep the property. And then towards the latter part of the week, we had a lot of lake property that was grassy areas, and there was a beach. And so we had to cut the grass because we wanted to have it looking nice for the weekend. So we did that. So during the course of a week, I was getting a good 40 hours a weekend as a young kid. And guess what? When the weekend came along, it was sort of like a gated community. In other words, people couldn't just drive in and picnic. You had to be a homeowner or a lot owner or a property owner, I guess I should say. And so no one wanted to do that, and they didn't have anybody to do that. So what I used to do is I used to work the gate. So I was a security guy. And sometimes that would be 12 hours on Saturday and 12 hours on Sunday. And the rest of the people are out there boating and swimming and having a good time. I was working. But you know what? When I was working on the weekend and I was over 40 hours, I was making time and a half. I was making $1 an hour, or roughly $1 an hour. And I thought, wow, there's nobody doing better than me. I was so happy and so grateful that I had this opportunity and had this job. Well, a couple of summers later, I guess the next summer, I worked out there, and the lot owners, the homeowners, whatever you want to call them, of the lake, they decided they wanted to build a stable. And this lake had about 800 or 900 acres of ground that was on the south side of the lake, and they call that the back acres. And so people wanted to buy horses and have horses, so they built this stable, this barn. Well, guess who took care of the horses and took care of the stable? Bill. I did a job Americans couldn't do. I learned how to operate a pitchfork. And you know what a pitchfork operator does in a stable? You take the horse out of the stall and you tie him up, and then you go in and with the pitchfork, you pitchfork out all the manure, and it builds up pretty fast. So it's not like you only have to do it once a summer, you do it all the time. And so I did that. And I saved up enough money that summer that I bought a horse and a saddle. And I think the whole outlay was, and this was a Tennessee walking horse, it had papers and a beautiful Western saddle and a whole bunch of other stuff for around $225, $250. That's, that was my saving. I took that out of my savings. I didn't say, Dad, buy this for me, or, oh, please, will you give me some more stuff? No, I wanted to buy it on my own because then I owned it. It was mine, and I took care of it. Wow, you can't believe how good that makes you feel, the joy in being able to do something on your own, to accomplish something. It feels so good. And yet today, kids live in their parents' basements or in the corner bedroom, and they whine about they can't find a job because they can't do jobs Americans won't do. When I was 16, I was approached by guy by the name of Marvin Taylor, and he was a walking horse trainer at a local a ranch in Hillsboro, Missouri. And so we made arrangements that I would still do some work at the lake, like on weekends, security, but during the week, they needed somebody to be the assistant walking horse chairman, or trainer, I mean. I was the assistant trainer. And I thought, whoa, this is really a great job. Well, you know what an assistant trainer does on a horse ranch? I operated the pitchfork, except there were a lot more stables and a lot more horses, but I did that. And I used to take care of the horses, used to wash the horses down, brush them down, and I even got to ride some of them, and some were really nice horses. One I never got to ride was a big black stallion they had. Man, he was in the first stall on the right, and it got to the point where at first I said, Marvin, you got to handle this horse and take him out, because I don't think he's liking me too much, you know. But eventually I even got to the point where I could handle him, because this guy was mean. And guess what? You know what I was making? $5 a day. They paid me $5 a day, and I worked 12 to 14 hours a day. And you know what else we did? We did things like they had a lot of acreage there, and they had it all in hay. They happen to grow lespedeza, which is a little bit different than alfalfa. And lespedeza that's pretty scratchy stuff. And here again, I used the skills I learned in putting stuff on top of a flatbed truck. I followed the tractor with the flatbed trailer around, and I picked up the bales of hay and threw them up on top of stacked them up on the flatbed trailer so we could take them over to the barn. Let me tell you, that took some strength. And early in the morning, when there's a lot of dew on the ground, those bales are heavy. And that scratchy stuff, I think I still have scratches and scrapes and abrasions on the inside of my forearms from throwing those bales up on top of that trailer. Anybody who worked on a farm or ever did any kind of work like that, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is a job Americans won't do, and I did it for $5 a day. $5 a day. But I wanted to do it. I wanted to learn how to, that was another thing. I wanted to learn what this was all about. I wanted to learn what happened on a ranch. I wanted to learn how to take care of horses. I wanted to learn all that. And I had this wonderful opportunity. And I didn't have somebody hold my hand and teach me. And it certainly wasn't a safe space when I went in that black stallion stall and had to grab him and haul him out of there so I could pitchfork out the manure that was in his stall. There was no safe space there. There was no nothing. A lot of times Marvin wasn't around. He had other things to do. And so I was a guy. I had to do it. But I loved that because I was free. I was independent. I had the American spirit. Where is the American spirit today? Where is the vision today? So what was I doing at the time? I was developing my American vision. And the vision I was developing was one of freedom and liberty and being able to live a life that was whatever I wanted to do. I can make whatever sacrifices I wanted to make, and I could become anything I wanted to make. Well, in the meantime, I'm going to high school, right? So I'm high school age. And guess what? In high school, I end up going to a school called Christian Brothers College High School. It used to be a college, but they had a fire burned down. They reopened it up, and the Christian Brothers operated the school, and they operated it as a high school. And it was the only high school in the entire metropolitan St. Louis area that was a junior Army ROTC school. Out of my class of about 40 kids in my grade school, 26 were boys, and 13 of the boys ended up going to CBC High School, and I was one of them. And we went there, we wore uniforms. We wore our uniforms to school. When we left the house, we wore uniforms, got on a bus, had to take a bus to another bus to a streetcar in order to get to school. It took about 45 minutes, and we had to be there early in the morning. And I wanted to play football, so I was on the freshman football team. And we had practice at night. So by the time I got home at night, it was dark, because in the fall it starts getting darker. And that's how I went to school. And then I had homework to do, and I also wanted to help my dad with some of his stuff. You know, I had the St. Louis American newspaper. We had to read it. You know, we had to get it out. It had to be done by Friday. So that's what I did, and I was happy to do it. And I didn't complain. I just thought, hey, I'm involved. I'm doing stuff. I'm making a difference. I'm helping out. I'm not just doing nothing. I'm just not. And you can't imagine the joy of accomplishment when you're doing stuff. And yet today, what's different today? It's not the Americans. It's the American spirit has eroded away, because back in those days when I was young, people say, well, we can never go back to that again. Yeah, we can go back to that again. It's very easy to go back to that again. We got a lot of people that are unemployed. We got 62% of the people in the United States is in the workforce. That's what it is, 62%. Forget these made up, manipulated unemployment statistics and all that. Forget all that stuff. Look at the real numbers. The employment rate in the United States is 62 point something percent. That means 38% aren't working. Now, some can't work. Some are retired. Some are too young. Some are disabled. But there's still, we're talking about 38% of 320 million people that aren't working. They can work. People can work. But they've been programmed to think you don't have to work. You don't have to be independent. You don't have to have the American spirit. You can just wait for the government to take care of you, and we'll house you, we'll feed you, we'll give you everything you want. We'll give you free cell phones. We'll give you all kinds of stuff, and we'll provide you with safe spaces. And all you have to do is just be a stay-at-home slave to the federal government and vote for the elite politicians. Vote for the political establishment that's giving you everything you've got. And don't ever think about accomplishing anything. Don't ever think about feeling the joy of accomplishment, because that ain't your life anymore. That's not the new normal. The new normal is you will do what you're told to do. You'll be housed where we want you housed, and you'll get fed what we can feed you, what we'll pay you to buy food. And that's going to be your existence. Kind of like being in the Matrix almost, isn't it? Almost like being in the Matrix. So anyway, I went to high school, and my senior in high school was 1952-53. And for 3 years, ever since I was in high school, in my starting my sophomore year, the United States was at war with in Korea, and that was a United Nations war. Everybody was involved in that. And it wasn't really a war. It was a war. They didn't declare war. It was all screwed up as the politicians do it. But in any case, everybody that I went to school with, we thought, oh, we're Army ROTC guys. We're going to be in the Army. So I just knew that when I graduated from high school in 1953, I was going in the Army, and I was going to Korea, and I was going to be fighting in Korea for the United States Army. That was it. I was sure of that. We graduated around the end of May of 53, and right about that time, guess what happened? They finally decided to end the conflict in Korea. There was this whole big thing about the 38th parallel and the demilitarized zone. And they had all these talks where, you know, who is going to be where and how were they going to do it. And they actually set up a line along the 38th parallel that the north side of it was North Korean, the south side of it was South Korean, and they put a table for the peace talk negotiators, where the North Koreans sat on the north side of the table and the South Koreans in the United States, United Nations, sat on the south side of the table. I mean, that's how bizarre it was. So my dad said to me, hey, if this war is over, you're going to college. I said, am I going to college? He says, yes. He said, nobody in our family has ever been to college. My dad only went to the third grade. Third grade. And you know why? Because his father, my grandfather, who I never met, who immigrated from Germany, died of tuberculosis when my dad was about 9 years old. And so my dad and his older brother, Charlie, who I talked about, helped build the house. They went out to work to take care of the younger brother, Chris, and the two girls, Caroline and Elsa. And so they went out and worked. My dad did all the jobs Americans wouldn't do. He did everything. He sold magazines. He did janitorial work. In fact, one job he had back in 1912, this is an interesting story. He actually worked for a theater in St. Louis, and he was kind of like the assistant usher and custodian, cleanup guy, odd job guy, you know, any type of job a young guy at 12 years old could do. And guess who his boss was? His boss was none other than Frank James. You know him, younger brother to Jesse James. My dad actually worked with Frank James for a couple of years or something like that. So he worked, and he, you know, and ended up in World War I, and ended up working for the St. Louis Sporting News, ended up becoming a linotype operator, and eventually saved up enough money to buy his own shop and start his own business, become an entrepreneur. So he's saying, hey, you're going to college. Nobody in our family's ever been to college. You're going. You're the first one. You're going. So I went to Mizzou, 120 miles away, 120 miles west. That's where I went. I went to Mizzou. And at that time at Mizzou, every student, every male student, I should say, every male student had to join or be enrolled in an ROTC program. We had an Army, a Navy, and an Air Force ROTC program. So I thought, yeah, you know, I've been in Army ROTC, and the Navy required a scholarship, and I had never and didn't know how to apply for that, and didn't know anything about that. So I ended up in the Air Force ROTC. So that was a mandatory 2 years. And in the meantime, I needed a place to live, and I met some guys that were from my high school. They were older guys and other high schools in the St. Louis area, and they were living in a fraternity house. And they said, you got to become a frat boy. And I thought, okay, that sounds kind of neat. Well, it was a Catholic fraternity. And so guess what we did? We took care of the fraternity house ourselves. And we typically had about 60 guys living in the house. It was a 3-story house, and we roomed usually 3 to a room. Bunk beds in each room, and then we had a room down at the end of each hall that was with dormitory that had bunk beds lined up in it, and some people slept in there. And on Saturdays, we used to clean the entire house. We cleaned it ourselves. We got up early on Saturday mornings and we cleaned it. We waxed and buffed the floors. We cleaned the toilets. We cleaned the showers. We cleaned everything in the house, the downstairs foyer and entranceway and living room that we had for guests, and in the basement area was our dining room. We cleaned all that. We took care of it ourselves. And as a young person, you pledged a fraternity. When you became an active member in the fraternity, we used to have active meetings every Monday night. And we elected our own officers. We didn't have anybody do that for us. We elected our own officers. Somebody was a president, vice president, etc. And we operated the house, and we functioned under our own rule. Guess what that was? A small, limited government close to home. We did it on our own. And guess what? We were pretty darn successful. We had our own athletic teams. We had scholarship teams. We did very well. And We went to church every Sunday. We were responsible for ourselves. So a lot of people say, oh, you frat boys, you know, you're nothing but party boys, and you screwed around and you did everything that was bad and you were pampered and everything like that. Wrong. Wrong. We took care of ourselves. We were responsible. We were self-reliant. So anyway, in getting through college, after 2 years, in order to stay in the Air Force ROTC program, they were only taking at that time fighter pilots and engineers. So I took the test to become a fighter pilot because I wasn't in engineering school, and I couldn't pass. My left eye just couldn't make it. I always had some vision problems, and so they said, no, you know, you got to be 20/20, and when they dilate your eyes, they really find out what's wrong, you know, with your eyes. So I couldn't get in. I couldn't get into the program. So then I was just kind of a civilian again. I was not in an ROTC for the last 6 years. I had been in some kind of an ROTC program. Now I wasn't. Well, then when it got to be before my senior year that summer, the draft board contacted me and had me report to a facility in St. Louis, and it was a pre-induction physical. And so they had all of us in there, you know, I guess they did this every day, and we were all lined up and, you know, and down to our skivvies, and no safe spaces there, let me tell you. And they, you know, we took the physical examination, and then we had a test we took, and I was in great shape. I passed the physical with no problem at all, and I scored like 98, 99% on the mental test, and they said I was one of the highest scores they had ever had there. And so they said, we want you to enter the Army, and we have a training for Army intelligence. And I'm thinking, oh, Lord, all I want to do is graduate from college like my dad asked me to do, you know, sent me to college. You know, when he sent me to college, I knew he meant graduate from college. He didn't mean just go and attend and see how I liked it and see, you know, if it was suited for me and see if I could find some gender studies or basket weaving or some other silly thing to do. I actually went knowing that I'd better graduate, huh? I'd better do that. So I turned on that, and I requested a deferment, and I got a deferment for my last year in college. But when I graduated, and I was on the, I wasn't on the 4-year plan. I ended up being on the 4.5-year plan. That's another story because I changed my major 3 times, and you had to have so many hours and so many credits and so many different courses and all that. But in the meantime, when I was going to college, my dad paid for that. And you know what he paid? It cost me $79 a month to belong to my fraternity, Phi Kappa Theta. And that included lodging, meals, and social dues. So, and you had to pay that, even though we were only in school around 9 months or so, you had to pay it 10 times a year. So it cost $790. So my dad paid for that. Yeah, he wanted me to go to college. He paid for that. Also, at that time, tuition and fees at Mizzou were $50 a semester. So that's, you add another $100 on there. Now you're up to $890, right? And it typically costs about $35 a semester for books and supplies. A lot of books you can get used, you know, because they didn't turn over books every 2 weeks. You know, the same books were used, you know, over maybe 2, 3, 4 years at a time. So add another $70 onto that, you're up to $960, and maybe, you know, round it off a few incidentals or whatever. Round it off to $1,000 a year. That's what it costs to go to college. And guess what? In those days, college, we got an education. I'm not so sure that's happening today. Are we really getting an education today when back then the United States was #1 in test scores in the world, and now we're in the 30s, high 20s and low 30s in test scores? And they say, well, how could you get a good education if you use the same books? Well, I guess because we studied the books and we knew what we were doing and we worked hard at it. Well, some people worked harder than others. I probably, of all the guys in my fraternity, I was probably in the lower quartile of those who worked hard, and it just came too easy to me, and I just wasn't that, I guess, into it. I was also into things like intramural sports like football, basketball, volleyball, and softball, and dating, and all, and doing social activities and being involved in the social part of running a fraternity and all that stuff. So anyway, that's a regret. I wish I'd have been a better student, but I don't know if it made that much difference to me. What really made a difference was when I knew that when I graduated, my deferment was up and the draft board was going to come calling for me. Back then, no safe spaces. Today, you have to the kids have to register for the draft, but they never get called, so they're safe, aren't they? They're safe. They don't have a sacrifice to make. It's all volunteer, which is the way it should be. So I graduated from college and I got home, and the next morning, or actually not the next morning, it was that afternoon, I drove to the office where the draft board was. And I walked in and I walked up to the counter and they said, "Can we help you?" And I said, "Yes, I'm Bill Muckler. I just graduated from Missouri. I have a deferment and I would like to know what my draft status is." They said, "Okay." Came back a few minutes later, they had a file card box. If you can imagine this in today's computerized age. They had one of these little steel file card boxes, and then they looked in there and he didn't have to look very far. He said, "Oh, congratulations, you're number one on the list for next month." And this was around the end of January, and February 1st was only, I think, the next week. And I thought, I'm going in the Army next week. And I just got out of college. I don't even have any time to celebrate. Now, when you graduate from college, you have to take a couple of years off to trek around or hide in your mom's basement or do something, while you find yourself, because you have to have some time to find yourself and know who you are, and you have to celebrate that you graduated. And you can't go out and get a job because those are all jobs Americans won't do. And I got a credit card, so why should I work? When I have a credit card, I can do anything I want to do, can't I? So anyway, I thought, oh boy, Bill, you're in trouble now. So I got up the next morning. I made a plan. And I got up the next morning, put on a coat and tie. I always had my hair cut real short back then. In the 50s, that was the style. And I knew my way around the St. Louis area pretty well. And downtown St. Louis had all the recruiting offices. I went to the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force recruiting offices. And I spent the whole morning doing that and talked to them, interviewed with them, and found out what their programs were and everything, because I was thinking, hey, if I went to college and now I'm, going on 22 years old, I'm not so sure I want to go into the Army as an enlisted man. I love the enlisted men. I think they're great, especially my Marines. But I didn't think I'd have anything in common with them, and I didn't think I would fit in right. And I thought that since I had the opportunity to go to college, that I could offer a lot more. I could make a bigger sacrifice. I could use my time and toil and talent to do something a little bit more. So then what happened was I went to the Marine Corps office in the early afternoon. I walk in the Marine Corps office, and this is a true story, folks, true story. There's a gunny sergeant, and he's got his dress blue trousers on and khaki shirt and tie. And I mean, this guy is ramrod straight. I mean, he looks like a combat vet. I mean, he's a real Marine. And he's talking to three young guys there, and they all look like they were maybe, just barely out of high school or something like that. And he looks at me and he says, "Excuse me, gentlemen." And he looks at me right in the eye and he says, "Sir, the major would like to talk to you." And I thought, he doesn't even know who I am, and he wants me to talk to the major. So I said, okay. And so he led me out of that room into a office in the back and introduced me to the major. Well, you see, these guys are so sharp, and they knew they had a quota that they had to recruit, enough Marines, but they also had to recruit some officer candidates. And he's thought, here's a guy with a coat and tie, looks a little bit older. He's got to be a college boy, and we need some college boys to become, go into the officer candidate course. So that's what he did. And I talked to the major, and I can't remember his name. I wish I knew his name. I just don't remember. But I talked with him for about an hour and a half. And this major could do everything that the Army, Navy, and Air Force recruiters couldn't do. He could explain the entire program to me. He could tell me the date I would go in, the date I could be commissioned, what it was expected of me, laid the whole thing out. And I thought, whoa, this is great. I actually know what I'm getting into. And so I said, I'm all in. And he said, okay, come back tomorrow morning. You have to go to this place, this doctor, and get a physical examination. And I thought, oh boy, I wonder if my eye problem with my vision is going to have an adverse effect on this. Maybe I won't be able to get in. So I thought, it's okay, I'm going. So I go to the doctor's office, and at that time, there's one doctor does everything. There's no specialist. One doctor is competent and capable of doing everything that needs to be done for a person. And so I walk in, and I'm waiting for a few minutes, and I see this eye chart on the wall. I thought, damn, if I memorize that 20/20 line, which I'm capable of doing, I got a pretty good memory. I'll memorize that 20/20 line. When he says, read that, I'll read it off, and I'll be golden. Well, sure enough, that's exactly what happened. I passed the physical, no problem at all. And passed the physical. I got my orders, and I went to Quantico. And my mom, bless her heart, she became a Marine mom. And this is kind of emotional for me because I love Marine moms. Greatest people on the planet. So anyway, the day I'm going to leave to go to Quantico, I've got my own car, and I'm going to drive from St. Louis to Quantico. And she sees me to the door, and she hugs me, and she's in tears. And I said, Mom, what's wrong? She says, oh, I'm so afraid, don't know what's going to happen to you, you're going away. And I said, hey, I've been away to college, for 4 years, and I'm okay. Well, this is different, so she was really emotional about that. And of course I was too. So anyway, I drive to Quantico. I go into the officers candidate course, which a lot of people don't understand is boot camp for officers, Marine officers. And it's really not easy. It's tough. And I can't say it's tougher than Paris Island or San Diego, but I can tell you this, it's probably a little bit different because our hours were a little bit longer, the course was a little bit longer, and they stressed leadership in there. In other words, we had to be acting leaders of our brother candidates, and our GIs were not at all easy on us. But I knew as soon as I got in there, they weren't there to harass me. What they were there is to give me an opportunity to prove that I could be a leader of Marines. Wow, think about that. The morning that we were commissioned, I stood there and at attention, and they called me a Marine. And Brigadier General Krulak talked to us about responsibility and all the things about being a Marine. And he told us we'd be leaders of Marines. And I thought, what greater honor could a person have? So all my life, my vision was to move ahead, was to get ahead in life, was to make something of myself, to accomplish things. And I thought, wow, being in the Marine Corps, I can see the world. I can go out and I can I can do things. I can do whatever I want to do, you know, and within the structure of the Marine Corps. So in doing that, I had an opportunity that very few have. And so when people say, oh, I don't like the military, I hate the military, I'm not going in the military, that's not for me, you don't know what you're missing. You don't know. You just don't know what an opportunity it is. And I think I've been pretty successful in life. And a lot of that was based on all my experiences leading up to that. So that was my vision of America. My vision was to give back to America. And so when I swore, I put my hand up as a young Marine officer, and I took the oath of a Marine officer. I took an oath to defend and support the Constitution of the United States of America, and that's still my oath, and I still follow that oath today. I wish more people felt the same way, but no, we live in a country now where the politicians are spineless, the publishers are spineless, the military spineless. Come on, get a spine, get a spine. Okay. And my book, this book is solutions. I wrote this for you. I didn't write this because I wanted to be an author. I'm not an author. I wrote this for you so you would have hope. You would have a vision. If you read this book, you will have a clear vision for America, and you can then use it to develop your own vision. So people, I'm just, my dear friends, relatives, readers, supporters, followers, I want to thank you so much for listening to me today and listening to me tell you about my life and my vision, and tell you that if I can do it, you can do it. If I can do it as a young kid whose dad said, hey, you know, you're going to do this or whatever, your kids can do it too. The kids can do it. It's not different. The only thing that's different is the technology. The American spirit is still available for all of us if we take it. Please embrace the American spirit. Have a vision for America. Have a vision where you sacrifice and you work towards something and you feel great about accomplishing something. You feel the joy of the American spirit. Have a vision, people. And thank you so much for watching. There's an article that goes along with this, so you can read the article and you can find out where you can get my book. You can buy 2020, A Clear Vision for America. I'm still writing, and I did a lot of writing this weekend on 2020, A Clear Vision for Our Future, which is just going to blow you away in the way I talk about our Constitution and our culture and our country. I write a lot of articles. Please subscribe to my newsletter. It doesn't cost you anything. It's free, and you get this newsletter. You get all the good things that I write about, and learn about my vision, and learn about your how America works. And you can also then learn how to develop your own vision and let your own vision mature over the years. And I'm a social media guy now. Who would have thought? So you can like me on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter, and you can link up with me on LinkedIn. And you can do all those social media things, including Googling me, because I'm not I'm Googleable. So you can go to Bill Muckler and Google me, and you'll find out actually I'm on there. So must be doing something good, must be doing something right, and I know I am, because I love America and I love you all. And so one thing I wanted to, before I part with the company with you all today, sign off, there's a proverb, Proverbs 29:18. You can look this up. Where there is no vision, the people perish. And I live by that, and that was one of my guiding lights. Where there is no vision, the people perish. So you have to have a vision. I'm not making this stuff up. This is real. You must have a vision. And so the 2020 vision is my life, and my life is a 2020 vision. And you'll learn what the 2020 vision is when you buy my book, read my book, and read my articles, and get on board with your own vision and let your own vision develop and mature and be a part of this wonderful country we have, this great republic we have. Be a part of America, be a positive part of America, and have your own vision, look forward. And like they say about my book, the book that gets people to look straight into the future. 2020, a clear vision for America. This is your host, Bill Muckler. Thank you for watching. It's been my pleasure. Next week, we'll have a guest, Joseph Montgomery will be on with us. And I can guarantee you his presentation is going to be awesome. So anyway, take care, folks. Bye-bye. And read. Don't be a person who can't read. You can read. I know you can. I know you know how to read. Do it. Okay. Bye-bye.